Hello friends! Welcome to Daily Sourdough. Today we're going to make sourdough bread. Sourdough is a naturally leavened bread, so the bacteria and the acids and the yeast all work together to create that rise. Sourdough is a naturally fermented food, which is good for gut health. The live organisms in the natural leavening respond to the natural elements around us. So if the day is cool, a little tepid water, a little bit warmer, is going to help the gluten develop and keep the organisms more lively. So in contrast, if the weather's warmer, you might want to use a little cooler water to help the gluten tighten. It's all about working with the elements and keeping those organisms alive and healthy. So let's get to the bread making. First, I'll take my starter and I'm going to use about 2 cups of starter. I fed my starter about 6 hours ago, and so it's lively, full of good natural yeast, and it's going to make a delicious pizza loaf. Next, we add 2 cups of water. You don't want to use tap water if you live in the city, because tap water has chlorine in it, which is going to kill your good bacteria and your good yeast. So I have well water, or else you can use bottled water, spring water. I'll stir this up until the starter is dissolved, and we'll let that sit for about 15 minutes and allow those yeast to begin working. Alright, it's been about 15 minutes, so let's see what it looks like. Can you see those bubbles starting to form? That means our starter is active and the wild yeasts are beginning to make that dough rise. Next, we're going to add 3 cups of flour, and I have some fresh ground wheat flour here. So I'll add 1 cup at a time and just gently mix it in. Since sourdough is alive, then we work with the environment. If your house is a little bit cold, then your water should be just on the tepid side. If your house is hot, it's in the summer, then your water could be on the cooler side. I like to use fresh ground flour, and sometimes a mixture I'll do half and half. Okay, and I'll add a 3rd cup. After this 3rd cup, we're going to let our dough rest a little bit. Sourdough likes to take a few rests. That allows the wild yeast and the bacteria and the acids all to begin working to give it that beautiful rise. Mix this in, and then we're going to let it sit for 40 minutes to maybe an hour. If your house is cold, it might take an hour before you see the activity that you want to, and you're able to mix in the rest of the flour. But if your house is really warm, then it will take less time. I like to start my sourdough bread while I'm cooking dinner. That way I can mix it and let it rest, go work on my dinner, then come back and add some more flour, then let it rest while I go work on my dinner again. Because this bread won't be ready until tomorrow. Alright, well, it's time to let it rest. So I'll cover it up and then I'll go work on my dinner. It's been about 40 minutes. Let's check our dough. You can see there's life in there. See the bubbles beginning to form already? The process of letting the sourdough starter and the water and the flour sit for a while is called autolysis. That allows the bacteria and the yeast and the acids to begin working. Sourdough is full of living organisms, and that's what makes it rise so well without commercial yeast, and that's what gives it that yummy tang. The next thing we do is add 2 more cups of flour, and then we'll add our salt. I like to mix these last 2 cups of flour in by hand. For some reason, my best bread is when I mix it by hand. And we just gently work the dough. I'll mix the last cup in. And with this cup, I'm going to mix 2 teaspoons of salt. I have it pre-measured here. The reason I mix the salt in last is because The salt will stiffen the dough, and we wanted to give it a head start in the rise before we added the salt. Now I'm just going to gently pick up the dough from underneath and fold it over itself, mixing that flour in. When you make a yeast bread, you mix it aggressively. The recipes always tell you to knead it 100 times or knead it for 7 minutes. And mixing sourdough is a gentle process. You just reach your hand underneath and then gently pick it up and fold it over itself. This is called stretch and fold. So I'm stretching the dough and folding it over itself. This is developing the gluten. Right now it's just a shaggy ball of dough. As you gently stretch and fold, you want your dough on the sticky side. That's called high hydration. That will give your dough more rise. Now that the flour is thoroughly mixed in, I'm going to let it rest again. It needs to rest another 40 to 60 minutes. And while that's resting, I'm going to go work on my dinner again. It's been about 30 minutes, but let's check our dough. I see signs of life. We're going to do another stretch and fold. So reach under the dough and stretch it upwards. See how it holds together better now? That means the gluten is developing. So reach under, stretch it up, fold it under, rotate your bowl, quarter turn. Do this about 8 times. You can tell it's beginning to form a ball. It's taking shape. Okay, let's let that rest again for another 30 minutes to an hour, depending on how warm your house is. All right, let's check our bread dough. It's been sitting for 40, maybe 45 minutes. I see some activity. Let's look at the bottom of the bowl. See all the bubbles? This is a good sign. That means the natural yeasts are very active. The little organisms are beginning to digest the gluten. That will give our bread a good rise. Let's do one more stretch and fold. So I reach under the dough and stretch. Oh, it has a lot more stretch to it now. And it's still sticky, which is good. We don't want to overburden the little organisms with too much flour. Give it a turn. And you can see that it's beginning to take shape. It's no longer that shaggy mass of dough. It's really coming together. When we stretch it, we don't want to tear it, so we don't want to overwork the dough. That would be like overworking your muscle. When you overwork your muscle, it tears. So we'll just gently stretch the dough, fold it over itself. Do that about 8 times. And then we're going to let it rest again. This time we're going to let it rest in the refrigerator to slow down the rise and allow it to ferment. We want it to ferment in the refrigerator for 12 to 24 hours, whatever your schedule is. Okay, see how smooth that dough is getting? That gluten is really developing now. So we'll cover the dough, let it rest in the refrigerator, and we'll shape it tomorrow. Okay, see you tomorrow. Welcome back. It's day 2 and time to shape the bread. Let's see how lively it looks. See all the bubbles? Lots of fermentation has been going on. It was in the refrigerator for 14 hours. Then I took it out and I let it sit in a warm room for another 2 hours. Next we're going to shape it and then put it in a Banneton for about 2 more hours until it's risen up about double. Now I'll show you a nice way to shape your sourdough, and notice I don't have any flour on my counter. It's because I want it to be a little bit sticky still. So take your dough and gently lift up half of it and pull it forward. You're just making a little rectangle shape by gently pulling on the dough. We don't need to be rough with it because we don't want it to tear. We're just going to gently stretch it out by lifting underneath and pulling on it. Then take this front half and fold it towards me like a letter. Then take this other side and fold it over the other half. Then take each end and gently stretch and fold it into the center. Then you have a nice little package. And see how it's still kind of sticky? That is a good thing. It will help it to rise higher. So flip your little package over, and this is where you start to roll it. So gently roll the dough towards you. So you're kind of lifting up from underneath and then pulling it towards you. And this is creating a smooth surface on the top there. So we just continue to roll it until the dough is taut and has a smooth surface. The stickiness of the dough is beneficial in helping you to roll this and smooth it out. See how the surface is getting so smooth? And there's a little bubble. That's what we like to see. It means there's lots of fermentation going on. Now I'll flour the Banneton really heavily. And if you don't have a Banneton, just use a bowl with a dish towel, a smooth dish towel. Now this smooth surface is now the top, because when I flip the Banneton over into the pot, the bottom, which is on the flour, is going to be the top of the loaf. So you want the pretty side down right now. Now we'll cover it and let it rise for about 2 hours in this warm kitchen until it's double in size. My bread's been rising on this counter for about 2 hours now. Let's see if it's ready. The oven's preheated to 500 degrees, and I have my Dutch oven in the oven to preheat that as well. Sprinkle the bottom with cornmeal. Trust me, if you forget this step, your bread will be stuck fast. Now, flip the dough into the Dutch oven, and then we score it. I'm going to score it in a half moon, and I score it really quite deeply, deeper than you think you should. This allows the bread to rise upward instead of outward. Then any moisture that's in the dough is going to be able to escape out the top. Put the lid on, and cooking the bread in a Dutch oven is going to give us that thicker crust that's so good on sourdough bread. Now I set the temperature to 450 and set my timer to 20 minutes. So it's cooked for 20 minutes. Now we'll take the lid off of the Dutch oven and let it brown for another 5 minutes. Went off. Let's see how it looks. Oh, It's beautiful. Look at that ear, it lifted right up. See, I scored it deep enough that allowed the moisture to rise up out of the bread and cause the bread itself to rise. That's beautiful. Let's cut into it and check the crumb. Normally you wouldn't cut into your bread when it's still hot, but in this house, it never sits on the counter and cools. You hear the crackling of the crust? Oh. See the open crumb? This is a good loaf. This is a nice loaf. You see the holes? This is called open crumb when you have the holes that are unique to sourdough bread. This is the traditional style sourdough bread. You can bake the same bread dough in a loaf pan. I bake a lot of bread, but I make a lot of other delicious sourdough recipes. So if you like this video, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe because there are more sourdough recipes coming up on Daily Sourdough.